Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Jonine.
So nice to have you here. So, Steve, we've got about 3 challenges that you have already raised with me, and I thought we could go through these, and I can promise you, with all the agents I speak to, there's nothing new about these challenges, but hopefully we'll be able to help you work through them and set you on your way to a better prospecting experience. So the first one you raised with me was about mindset. So tell me what flicks through your mind when it comes to wanting to or needing to sit down and do a prospecting session.
I think from the very beginning it's actually sitting down and making that move, Jonine, because I come into my desk and I look over there, or I go and get the cup of coffee, and I'm not focused. I pick up the phone and look at it, or I go through the emails, you flick through the other things, do a bit of searching on the internet, and those sort of things don't let you, it's always easier to go over there and do those jobs instead of doing what you really should be doing, and that's getting on the phones or connecting with people, because without connecting with people, I've got no work.
And Steve, they call it procrastination, don't they?
Yes, that's exactly right, and that's what I do plenty of.
Yeah. So part of the reason you procrastinate, and I hope you don't mind me using that word, is because you're probably not organised. And when people don't go into a prospecting session organised, they leave themselves flapping around a sail in the wind and waiting for any possible distraction to come in. Now, part of the reason also that you're procrastinating is you probably feeling a little uncomfortable about making the calls.
Definitely, because yes, that's exactly right. Because you don't want to get that feeling of neglect, or your worth is not worth anything. That's the thing.
Because of negative feedback, a little bit of resistance coming back. Okay, so I look at this the same way I would look at a trip. And I live on the Sunshine Coast, and let's say I was planning a trip to New South Wales. There's no way I would get into my car without knowing I've got a full tank of gas, probably throw some snacks in the glove box, make sure I've got plenty of water. And I've got one of those cars that tells me if there needs to be air in the tyres. But in the old days, you take it down to the garage and you make sure your tyres and everything else was organised. You'd be stupid to take off on a trip with that distance without the organisation. Okay, and I'd also make sure I had a jack in the boot. It's no different to preparing your prospecting session, and I feel confident when I say to you, if you put preparation in and some structure into your sessions, you would start these with a lot more confidence. But I'd like to go back just a little bit. I think yourself, like many others out there, there's always that apprehension for prospecting sessions. I do believe a lot of agents actually prospect on a daily basis. But if that is not needed because you're manning a sales office or similar, you're only doing it once or twice a week, if at all, and at the moment you probably need to be doing it every day, the apprehension may kick in even the day before. And I have this belief that what you take to bed, you wake up with. So I would suggest, Steve, that you have some positive thinking written down, like an intonation, written down, that you might just let it run through your mind a little bit as a mantra the night before you close your eyes, so pop it next to your bed. And I am challenging you to do this. And it might be that tomorrow I am going to make 50 prospecting calls. I do not expect everybody to pick up the phone, but the ones that do, I'm going to promise myself that both of us will have a very pleasant experience, and where possible, I'm going to be extremely helpful. It'll be something very simple like that, but find something out that resonates with you and make sure that's the last thing you take to bed at night. Do you feel that's something you could work with?
My word, like any good advice is worth working with, Jonine.
And will you do it, Steve?
I'll have to do it, because it's...
I'll check up on you.
You will do, no doubt.
Now, the next thing I think we've got to talk about is the preparation. All right, so you've got the little mindset thing happening. And now I know the mindset is a case of taking yourself out of your comfortable zone and getting a little bit uncomfortable with prospecting, taking yourself out of the familiar and getting into a little bit of the unfamiliar. But that'll work itself through very quickly when we get your preparation in place. Now, you have already mentioned to me that you have a database of inquiry where people have actually walked in or phoned in, and this has all been logged in your CRM system. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct, yes.
So these people have already put their hand up at some point, regardless of when that may have been, and given you indication that they not only have interest in land, but they have interest in your specific project. So you're way ahead of most real estate agents out there when you've got this database, all right? So the hard work's done, really. It's just a case of getting your systems sorted out and getting the right scripting. So I know for me, and I've worked on a lot of projects for a lot of the major developers here in Australia, and the first thing I make sure is I've got 100 calls lined up for the day. Now, I know from experience that between the hours of 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock, I can usually get about 50 dials out. And I have a particularly high answer rate. So that would generally mean in the first call round, I would have discussions with about 30. So now, Steve, how many calls or how many dials, how many answers would you get out of 25 dials, do you think, at this point?
Oh, probably at this point around about 6 to 7.
Okay.
My rate's not very high at all.
Okay, and it's not just for you. That is pretty average across the range of agents anyway. And I think you'll find that will significantly increase once you get your mindset right and once you get your preparation right. So I'm going to assume that you're up and running. 50 calls, you could easily manage 50 calls for you. If the answer rate's that low, then you would easily manage 50 calls between 9 and 12. So if you only set yourself 2 half days a week or 2 days a week for prospecting, which at the moment is probably quite doable, you should have 50 calls out of the way by 12, have a half-hour break. You need to step away from your desk and then go back and do a second round of calls after that. So for the ones that didn't answer, go and do a second round of calls after that. Do you think you could dedicate that much time to a prospecting session?
On my current way I use my time, I think I can, Jonine.
Okay. When you sit down to a prospecting session, do not leave your desk until you've dialed 25 numbers, Steve. I always work in increments of 20 to 25. So I will not leave my desk, and I'm constantly counting them up, going, I really want to get up, make a cuppa, get a coffee, go for a walk around the block, whatever, but I never leave. And if I'm at 20, I make sure I hang in there till 25. And it's amazing how after a while you're able to safely guess that you've made 25 calls. It just becomes part of your clock when you're sitting down prospecting. So that will actually help you set an intention when you're prospecting. And when you set an intention, it's amazing how all those distractions just fog off into the background. People don't come knocking. Just those little things don't come in, but you've got to set that intention. I'm not leaving my desk until I've made 25 dials. Do you think you could do that? Yep.
Yeah, I think I'll give it a go.
Steve, I need commitment. All right. So the other thing you need to do is make sure you track your calls. So you need to, if you haven't got a CRM system that's where you can enter, I've dialed at this time on this day, at least have some sort of notepad beside you, because you want to know that you've called Mrs. Jones and Mr. Smith and Mr. Rogers and all of that, and you want to put a name, just a line through the name, if you can't track it on your CRM system, so that you know who you've got to go back and search in your database to call the second time in the afternoon. And it's amazing how in the morning, if you made 50 calls in the morning, only say 25 answered, you'd probably get another 10 to 15 in the afternoon. So ring them the same day. All right. Now, I find my answer rate on projects generally sits around the 65, 70% range, which you might think, Steve, is very high. The reason I believe I get to that level of answer rate is because I'm prepared. And when you're prepared, your confidence, you're very calm and you feel very centered because you know exactly what you're doing. So just have a think about that in time. You want to aspire to that. I don't want to waste my time dialing numbers and not have anybody answer. My time's too valuable. So a little bit of preparation in at the front end, a bit like taking that long trip, is worth it.
to putting a map in place for me to follow.
Absolutely. Yep. That intention is a very powerful thing. It's sort of like an affirmation. All the world influencers, the successful people, they always have their intentions set out for every project that they tackle. And I imagine, Steve, unless you're I don't get the impression you're a high-powered performer. I think you enjoy your job and you're working at a pace that works well for you. So you don't want to be spending any more time at it than you need to. You don't want to take it past the enjoyment level. So make sure that you dedicate the time and put the planning in so you can get this prospecting task out of the way in as quick time possible. And I would suggest that if you've made 50 calls in half a day and you got your answer rate up to say 30 out of that 50, you're going to be quite a busy boy. So you probably only want to be prospecting for half day a week. The next thing I want to look at is how do we make sure that you get a good shot, some good traction with those calls right from the get-go. When you get your introduction right, when you get your phone skills right at the beginning, it packs a powerful punch when it comes to looking at your results. So let's have a look at a script. Now, I think you've already indicated to me earlier that you flounder a little bit the way you approach.
Definitely, yes.
A little bit? Okay, so I'm going to share a screen with you. And this is a little script that I've put together to hopefully help you out. And I'm going to go through why we are saying things the way we do. All right. And I'll make sure I send you a copy of this, Steve, so you don't have to write it down. So I always introduce myself, good morning, good afternoon. It sounds a little bit more formal. It breaks my introduction out of the everyday conversation somebody might have heard multiple times that morning, like the highs and how are yous and the hellos, etc. And as you can see, I've also put little hyphen breaks throughout the script, and I always put them in to remind me to take just a fraction of a stop in that point, allowing the listener to keep up with what I'm saying. So I start with good morning or good afternoon, straight in with their name, then your name, and then the name of the project. It's pointless putting the name, if anything, when you say which agency you belong to, particularly if you're working on a project, they're going to get distracted by trying to remember when they had any relationship with the agency. But they will likely remember the project because they would have had a bit of an emotional attachment to it during the inquiry stage. They either like the land, they like the road, they like the price, something. So I would put the name of the project in and the location. So it might be Sunnyside Land Development, Sunshine Coast, and they can get their bearings very quickly at that point. And I always say just a quick call, so they straight away know you're going to respect their time on the call. Now, you don't want to say it factually that they inquired, because when you do that, you are basically telling them something they did, and that can get their back up. So I always go straight into, I understand you may have inquired with us. I never say you inquired with us. I understand you may have inquired with us back in 2018 June. All right, it softens it up, it keeps it away from being fact. In actual fact, when you state a fact to somebody in the introduction stage, they leave the conversation and their brain starts tracking backwards to the time where they thought they were making calls and inquiries. All right, you've lost them. They've already left you, and by the time they come back, you're already halfway through your introduction. So keeping it soft, I understand you may have inquired with us back in June 2018, is going to keep them engaged. Now, the very next thing you must come in with is a double-barrel question. You always finish your introduction with a question because you've got to give them something to come back with, and it's safe to go with double-barreled rather than a closed question. So I've written two options here. Now, the first one is, have your property needs now been met, or did your circumstances change? Now, if they say our circumstances changed, you also want another double-barrel question already prepared, and that might be, was that because of a financial interruption or a financial issue, or was it another matter that blindsided you. So you want another little double barrel question prepared. Now, the other one you can use is, have your property needs now been met, or is there still a flicker of interest there? I've used that one more than the other, and the flicker of interest always lightens the question up. And often they come back with, oh, I suppose there's a bit of a flicker. It lightens it to a flame, a nice gentle little thing that we all enjoy looking at. You can work with those, with that introduction, Steve?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
9 times out of 10, what will happen is you're basically giving them the mic. By this time, you've had about 60 seconds on the phone. You haven't come at them too hard, so they're starting to relax just a little bit, and they're going to hopefully answer one or other of those. In my experience, 90% of them choose one or the other to answer. The only time I find they don't answer is when they've decided they don't like you, but that is most unlikely when you use this type of introduction in a calm, centered fashion. All right?
Yeah, you're not putting them straight on the spot. You're giving them an open question.
A little option. Yes, you're giving them a little option.
Yes.
So you've politely come into the call at a professional standard. You've done what I call net speaking. You haven't gone in and said a whole lot of unnecessary words. Hello, I'm Steve Hubbard from such and such an agency, and I'm calling in relation to such and such a project, and I just wanted to have a quick chat with you because I understand. Can you see the length of that introduction?
Yes.
Most people do it. Most people do it, Steve. By that time, the person's going, oh my God, I'm on the phone with a freaking chatterbox. Okay, so it's really important to keep your words at a minimum, which is why the script works. And I've tried it, used it thousands of times over. Now, Steve, I think it's important then to let them bleed out on these answers. Let them talk for as long as they can. Now, you did already mention to me earlier that you have a whole lot of questions you want to get out and ask them so that you can qualify where they are in their thought process. And that's all very well, but if you keep trying to come in with those questions, you may lose the engagement. So I always let them bleed out, let them say whatever they want to say for as long as they want to say it, because I often find they'll answer a lot of those questions when I do. All right?
So be the listener. Be the listener in this.
Be the listener. And that's called being centered. It's being front, present, and front and center, and engaged listener.
Good words. Yep.
All right. So do you think you can work with those options, Steve?
Oh, look, having something written down like that would, my things would just escalate, I think, Jonine, because as I say, I'm not focused on, got nothing, and I'm sort of here, there, and everywhere with most of my calls, and not directed down a path, because with my calls, I've got to be doing it because I'm putting all the effort in. I want to be able to get a sort of a commitment out of it at the end of the day to be able to do something with that call.
I completely understand.
Whether that's going to lead to a lead or to a generation of a sale or something, I need to get to the end.
So Steve, just to recap, mindset, really good to get an intonation together, a simple one that resonates with you, and make sure that that is repeated in your mind before you close your eyes the night before a prospecting session. And I would recommend anybody in property do this, anybody actually in selling or needing to build up to a phone prospecting call. Getting yourself organised, it's like organising yourself for a trip. So making sure that you have at least 100 calls set up on the dashboard of your CRM system, because you might get a role happening and think, whoa, I'm really enjoying this. I love prospecting, but it's taken me a lot of pain and heartache to actually get to that point where I enjoy it. I would never start a session without at least 100 options lined up. Make sure that you do not leave your desk without having made at least 25 calls in any one sitting. And you should be able to get between 9 in the morning and 12 o'clock. You should easily be able to get 50 dials out, because not a lot of people are going to answer. Then come back that same afternoon and finish the second calls, because you've got time to do that at the moment. All right. Never get on the phones without your script sitting next to you, so that you can totally free up your mind. You want to be able to, I was training a person recently, and they looked at me and they said, on your mind when you're dialing that number? And I had to stop and think. And absolutely nothing is in my brain when I'm dialing that call other than dialing the call. I don't need an agenda in my brain at that time because I already know what that is. I've put that to rest. I know that's going to happen. I know I'm going to, my body brain's going to take me there anyway. My script is sitting right here at eye level, so I don't have to think of the things to say. And if something's distracting me and that phone gets answered, I go straight to my script and I'm totally engaged. Having the water there so that you don't start choking through a call. Having some snacks so you don't have to leave your desk until the 25 calls are up. It's preparation, Steve. Plain and simple.
It sounds so easy. Why I haven't sort of taken on that, but I've really, having directions from a person like yourself would be very beneficial, Jonine.
Well, if you can take up those simple steps, I'd like to speak to you in a couple of days, Steve, and just see, and I'll make sure you get a recording of this call, just see if you can follow through that early stage structure and sit back and watch how your whole process is going to be more pleasant, and you'll find your call answer rate will rise because you're just so much more organised.
That would be a great result.